What's up, everybody? Welcome to Political Science 130, Institutions of Democracy. I am your professor, Colin Grimes. It's so good to be here. I hope that you're feeling restored and regenerated and ready to go because this is going to be a really interesting course. We are at a very important moment in history and an inflection point, if you will. It's a time when there are many questions and many uncertainties, and the future of politics and democracy is really more uncertain than it has been in many decades. And so, in a course like this, we'll be focusing on the institutions of democracy, and we'll be trying to think about their fate in the future and what might happen. And we'll do so by looking at how these institutions have emerged and evolved and what kinds of purposes they serve. But we'll also focus on some of their weaknesses, and we'll focus on the way they've evolved and how they might undo themselves in some circumstances. So this is a course about institutions, about democracy, but it's also a course about where we are in human history. And so I want you to think about that as we go forward. Now, today, we won't deal with a lot of the substantive content from the course. Instead, we'll just kind of cover some basics, the administrative items, the nuts and bolts, if you will. We'll talk about expectations and what we'll do in here, what you can expect from me from you, and so on. So I want you to be engaged and present, but just know that on Friday, we'll really begin addressing the themes from the course. So let's just kind of step back and talk about the, uh, the terms of this course and the way things will work. So every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, we'll come together at this time, which is 11:30, and we'll meet for 50 minutes. Our meetings will be live. They will be synchronous, as we say, and I record them. So the reason is because I want to make it available to you for review later and available to those students who aren't able to attend lecture for whatever reason. So I record the lecture, I upload them, but we do meet every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at this time. And the invitation links for our live meetings will always be available on announcements on CAT courses, where I'll post them with at least an hour to spare. You can reach me via email directly at the email here. You can also use CAT courses to mail me using the inbox feature. And you can, of course, reach out to me during the class as well and stay back and stay after and chat with me if you want. There are a variety of ways for you to communicate with me, and all of them that I just listed are acceptable. I do encourage you to come to office hours if you have questions or comments that might require more discussion or that we could really talk about for some time. Those office hours will be on Wednesday and Friday from 3:30 to 5 p.m. And the way that'll work is, of course, you will come via Zoom if you want. You can walk in if you choose to. You can also make an appointment if you don't want to walk in. And I encourage you to just reach out to me and talk with me about when it might work for you to meet if you're not able to come during office hours. Now, let's talk briefly about this course and what we'll be discussing in the content of the course. As I told you already, it's about democratic institutions like the executive, the legislature, the courts, behavioral norms, pluralism and liberalism, ideas. All of the above would count as democratic institutions. And this course is a course about those institutions, their design, their maintenance, their evolution. We'll talk about parties and legislatures, unions, executives, executive legislative relations, courts. We'll talk about the problems that these institutions have been created to solve. We'll talk about why they take the form that they do. And we'll talk about how altering them can change behavior and can tailor human behavior. This is a course that's very much about the humanly devised constraints that we set up in pursuit of organizing politics and making decisions collectively. So every set of rules or every arrangement that we study will have in common that we created them. We designed them ourselves to solve certain problems. And we'll be approaching institutions in this way in this course. Now, if you're here, you might have an interest in democratic institutions. You might have an interest in these humanly devised constraints, these rules of the game. Maybe you don't have an interest, but you're willing to see what it's all about and consider that you might be curious at the end of the class. Either way, I think that there's a lot here for all of us. And the reason is because institutions reach well beyond just democratic politics. Economic institutions, social institutions, all of them count as institutions and rules of the game. And so in a course like this, we examine questions and methods and concepts and approaches that we use to study institutions. And in this case, we'll focus on democratic institutions, but our approach will be rooted in institutional analysis. And so you'll learn a set of skills that you can transport to other courses and take along with you when the course comes to an end. So we'll be providing a common experience in addressing these issues on this topic. And it's open to all students in political science and outside of political science. If you are interested and you're from some other field, we're very excited to have you. We have no doubt that you can learn a great deal and that we can learn a great deal from you. You know what, everyone? I just realized that I'm not sharing the syllabus, and I'm so sorry about that. I shared the syllabus in the chat, and I hope that maybe you had opened it, but I think it's helpful if we're looking at the same thing. Okay, so since we're focusing on institutions, and because this is a course that's available to all students, and because it sets out to provide that common experience, we'll be beginning and covering this issue relatively broadly, as well as precisely in those weeks where we do zone in on certain topics. So we'll start first and foremost with institutions and political institutions. And we want to be able to describe their structure and their operation. Secondly, we want to be able to describe and analyze the central questions and theories and approaches, findings about the origin, the maintenance, and the evolution of these democratic institutions. We want to describe and critique contemporary political science research on these types of questions concerning institutional design and analysis. And we want to come out of this able to conduct basic but rigorous social science research on formal rules and norms. We have quite a few comments in the chat. I'll share it again, everybody. It's up there at the top. I think it's been shared a couple times now. Thanks, Lewis. Thanks, everyone, for helping out. It takes a village, as you can see. And okay. So we're interested in learning how to engage in institutional analysis, but also in critically assessing the most recent research on democratic institutions and understanding the way they operate and function in their structure. We, after all, created them, so we want to be able to understand them in an equally systematic way. And so what we'll do then is for each specific institution or arrangement, we'll begin with sort of a discussion or an investigation of their origin, kind of historically. We'll talk about how they evolved and what purposes they serve. And we'll also talk about different ways of understanding them systematically and why they differ in the ways that they differ across countries and how we can understand that variation in an analytical and a systematic way. And so those democratic institutions don't look the same everywhere. One of the questions that we address is why they take the form that they do and why they change when they change and how and why they change. Now the course is conducted online. As you can see, you're here already, and I can trust that you were able to access the invitation link and then arrive here on time. Thank you very, very much for that. As a reminder, we will be doing everything online, and I'll be recording the lecture as well as posting the video later. I do encourage you to download the software to your desktop. You can use Zoom by opening the invitation link on your browser, but you might get disconnected if you have any difficulty along the way. Sometimes it's just better to have it set up. I don't think there's any cost to you through your UC Merced account. So I would encourage you to do that. These meetings will be held synchronously and they will be live, meaning you do need to attend the class meetings and you do need to participate by engaging with your peers and asking and answering questions, analyzing questions, sharing information, participating in activities that I might set up. All of this is important. And I sometimes am of the mind, if not always, that you will learn more from your peers than from me. And in that regard, participating becomes especially important because you listen to each other and you engage with each other and you share information and you share your insights. And oftentimes you get something from the discussion that you couldn't get from me. And so I ask you to participate and to do so regularly. And that begins with preparing notes and completing the reading before you arrive to the lecture meeting, and then actively contributing once you're here by making connections or giving examples or asking questions, maybe raising points from the reading or illuminating passages from the reading. All of these are useful ways of participating. And I encourage you to do it in a way that works for you and participate in a way that is meaningful for you. Now, if you're a student who has a variety of challenges coming to class because of either multiple jobs or a job, or maybe you're taking care of a family at home, or maybe you have other conflicts that are unavoidable, we're under very difficult circumstances. And I'm aware that the pandemic has presented many of us with challenges that we just can't really reckon with in ways that don't include watching the lecture later or reviewing the material later. So I'm okay with you doing that if you have to. That's why I record the lectures. That's why I share the links and why I make all the material available, including the slides. I do ask you to come to lecture if you can and to make every effort. And if you're a student who cannot participate, I ask that you maybe do something to try to kind of fill the gap, maybe come to office hours or try to speak with classmates, whatever you can do to stay up to speed. But I do understand that there are challenges that we can't get around. And so I'm willing and able to accommodate you. I just ask that you make every effort that you can to be here. Now you'll need a computer, a personal or an off-campus computer. If you're already accessing the lecture now, I trust that you have a way to do that. And just remember that you'll need to be here Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at this time for the live meeting. And so just try to schedule that or have access to a computer during that period, and you'll be good to go. If that means that you need to appropriate the family computer, maybe come down and sit down a few minutes early so you can make sure you have it. Whatever you have to do to be here, I think that we'll all be better if we can try to make it to lecture. Now, luckily, I think that this class takes place at a time that is conducive to sleeping in, right? If it's your first class of the day, if you're an individual who can sleep in, who has that luxury, one of the advantages of taking class from home is you can just kind of wake up and just kind of roll into class. So if that's you, cool, no problem. Just however you show up, however you get here, just be here on time and be ready to engage and we'll be good to go. Now keep your browser up to date. Make sure that you have things up to speed so that you don't get cut off. Sometimes students aren't able to join the meetings through the invitation link that I share on CAT courses. If that is a situation that happens to you, which sometimes it does, you can always search my name in Zoom and bring up any active meetings that I have going. And I don't use passcodes for the meetings. So you can join the meeting that way if for whatever reason you cannot access the meeting through the invitation link that I share on announcements. Now, sometimes students email me at the beginning of class if they can't join the meeting. I'm not going to be able to respond because I'm hosting the course. I'm hosting the meeting. So just remember that you can use the Zoom search function if the invitation link itself doesn't work. So those class invitation links will always be posted on Cat Courses in announcements. I do my best to have them up at least an hour in advance. Sometimes time is limited, but I always get them up ahead of time. And so just trust that it'll always be there and you should have plenty of time to spare. As a reminder, the office hours will be virtual as well, and we can meet as a walk-in, or you can make an appointment if you wish. However you wish to meet with me, I just ask that you, well, if you walk in, you'll get a waiting room that you arrive at. If you want to make an appointment, I just ask that you contact me and we set something up well in advance so that I know that you're coming and so that we can make sure to set that time aside for you. It's a busy week for all of us, I'm sure. So however we can clarify and schedule things, the better. Sometimes, for example, if you email me the night before, it might be too late. You know, sometimes it takes a day to respond to the volume of email, and maybe it's difficult to meet that quickly. So just try to contact me in advance if you want to meet, and I'm excited to meet with you. Let's just find a time that works for both of us. So there are no required texts for the class. I provide all of them. There is technically one required text, but I give it to you. It's a PDF, a scan of a book by Leipart, Patterns of Democracy, which is one of the best known books in this field of democracy research on institutions. This is a book that I will be posting on Cat Courses with all the other readings under files, under the file folder that's labeled readings. And the reason I like to do that is because in my experience, textbooks can become quite dry. And moreover, you have to endorse the viewpoint of the author in every single chapter. And you can't expose students to the variety and the sort of creativity of the whole range of different thinkers that might represent all the different topic areas in a field of inquiry. So in this case, we'll be doing a lot of classic, but newer and important and kind of thematic readings that cover the full breadth of the issue area, but that don't succumb to that dryness and that uniformity that you get with that textbook. And I think that you might appreciate not having to buy textbooks as well. So that's a consideration too. And at this point, I've only uploaded one reading. It's the one for Friday, but in the next week, I'll be uploading the rest of the readings for the semester, kind of gradually. And within a few days, most of the ones for the next few weeks should be available. And within a couple of weeks, all the readings should be available. Now, the grading for the course, we'll have four assignments. We'll have a response paper, we'll have a research design, and we'll have 2 exams. And what I've tried to do is I've tried to set up these assignments and differentiate them enough so that they're not giving you the same assignment over and over, and so that there's some variation, and so that there are some different things that you're doing in these assignments. And so the first paper, or the first assignment, excuse me, is a response paper. And this is basically just going to be a written critique of the readings, 5 double-spaced pages, 20% of your grade. The paper is designed to be an analytical response paper, not a restatement of the readings. You should try to synthesize the readings by focusing on one issue, debate, concept, or theme. And you don't need to include all of the readings, but you cannot just focus on one. And the objective is to develop an original argument and to root that argument in theory and evidence from the course, and to synthesize and connect some of those key readings that relate to what you do in that paper. So this is a response paper. You're not bringing in original or new articles or content, but you are critically engaging with some key issues and readings from the course. That's the first assignment. The second assignment is a research design. And this is going to be 8 to 10 double-spaced pages, not including an abstract or references or tables or figures if you include any of those. And the goal of this design is to give you an opportunity to focus on a question related to the course that interests you, and to put together a research design or a strategy or an approach to actually studying that question and engaging in doing research on that question. So you will essentially put together a paper that takes the form of an empirical journal article or a conference paper, you'll want a research question, a brief literature review. You want to form a hypothesis, discuss the method, the variables, the cases, the possible sources of data. You can include some preliminary analysis if you want, but that's not required. The objective of this paper is just to set you up as if you were to actually carry out a research project. You don't actually have to do that. The objective here is to do something that's productive and something that you could potentially do later in actual research if you chose to do that. This is going to be 30% of the grade. And we'll talk about both of these assignments well in advance, and we'll have plenty of discussion and talk about this, and we'll detail this, and we'll make sure that you're in a very, very strong position to complete these assignments. Now, we also have midterm and final exams, but they're not going to be as similar to the papers as the papers are to each other. Those exams will consist of multiple choice questions and short answer questions. There won't be an essay component. I think that in the case of the exams, because the courses are shorter, the class meetings are shorter, it makes sense for us to focus on smaller bites and to focus on more succinct and more concise analyses, short answer, some multiple choice questions. That I think is going to be a useful approach for the exams for us. I'll also distribute the details for the exams at least 2 weeks prior, if not more. So we'll cover those and discuss those well in advance, and the details and the due dates for those assignments are already available on the schedule. Now, quickly, we'll discuss some of the guidelines for writing assignments. Pretty basic. You just need to double space, use Times New Roman, paginate, type your papers, 12-point font, 1-inch margins, cite your sources, use a bibliography. You need to use some consistent citation style, be it MLA or APA or Chicago. It's up to you which one you choose, but just be disciplined and be conventional, and be consistent. And I ask that you possibly consider going to the Writing Center and consult style manuals, etc. Use the resources available to you to complete your papers. And that means not just the Writing Center and myself, but possibly even classmates who you might engage to do maybe like a peer review or something along those lines. Now, there won't be any late work accepted. Now, I realize that under a pandemic, we face a variety of obstacles to getting stuff done on time. I understand that well. I'm right there with you. I'm working from home, and I don't have access to a lot of the materials that I would normally have access to. And you can't often anticipate what kinds of obstacles will come up. With that in mind, I'm very flexible. I just ask that you be honorable and disciplined, and that you make every effort to finish things on time, and that you only ask for extenuating circumstances if there's an emergency or if something has truly prevented you from finishing something. That means finishing stuff on time and being disciplined. And I'm telling you straight up, we are more flexible faculty during a time like this, but students, I think, are also finding that with more flexibility, there's sort of less accountability, in the sense that when those due dates are more flexible, you might inadvertently find yourself less able to complete stuff on time because you might not feel the same motivation. But you need to know that accountability is important. So use those due dates as due dates, and only ask for extenuating circumstances if you have an emergency. Now, of course, those emergencies are more likely because of the situation we're in. And I'm primarily interested in you finishing the class and taking skills with you to new courses. But you do need to finish stuff, and don't abuse flexibility, and don't abuse the circumstances, because it might end up harming you if you're not careful. So that's all I'll say. I know that you're all adults. We're all in a position to excel. It's just that we need to be realistic about some of the hazards that present themselves when we are flexible about due dates, or when there's the possibility of an extension. Now, if you're a student who needs special accommodations, please speak to me immediately. And we'll make sure to talk with services for students with disabilities to get you set up. I just ask that you communicate with me right away so that we know what you need in preparation for the assignments. So we won't go into too much detail over the course outline, but I do want to talk briefly about where we're headed and where we'll start. So I ask that you review the syllabus after class. It's available in the chat. Please download a copy. I'll also make sure that it's uploaded to CAT courses. On Friday, we'll begin to talk about institutions and the institutional approach and how we understand institutions and political institutions in particular. Next week, we'll begin introducing the different democratic institutions as well as the concept of democracy. This week will set the stage for the rest of the course, where we'll kind of systematically analyze each individual institution or set of institutions. And so that begins in week 3 with the legislature, where we'll talk about the origins of democracy and the origins of democracy, specifically as it relates to the parliament as the democratic institution. In turn, we'll do another week on the legislature, where we begin to look at some more contemporary patterns in Latin American countries and elsewhere, where we compare some of contemporary legislatures to earlier legislatures, and we think about how they've evolved over time. In turn, after President's Day, we will turn our attention to cabinets and the composition and evolution of executive cabinets. You might notice that we don't actually focus on executives themselves. The reason is because executives aren't technically democratic institutions. A democracy is a democracy because of a balance of power or check and balance relationships, partly, that exist between different institutions and really between the legislature and the executive. And so we'll focus on the cabinet as a potential area of power sharing or contestation as a democratic institution. We'll in turn focus on executive legislative relations and relationships between the government and the parliament or the Congress in different types of democracies. We'll turn our attention in turn to the courts and focus on issues of judicial review and their implications for democracy after talking more generally about the courts and their function in a democracy. March 5th is going to be a Friday, and that's going to be the day of our first exam. That exam will be posted on files, and I'll create an assignment link on CAT courses where you will submit your completed exam after the duration of the meeting ends. And you'll have the duration of the class period, maybe even a little bit more time, because sometimes I post it just a few minutes early to complete the exam. And you'll post that on CAT courses when you're done on assignments. After the midterm exam, we'll focus on electoral systems and the different types of electoral systems under different types of democracies. We'll turn our attention to political parties and their functions in a democracy, both inside of and outside of legislatures as the key democratic institutions. We'll have a nice long break, spring break, and then the Cesar Chavez holiday on March 26th before we come back and focus on government and opposition and the notion or the institution of an opposition and the way that the opposition matters to democracy. We'll focus on that in a theoretical sense, but also in a practical sense by focusing in particular on the case of Venezuela, which is a situation in a country where the opposition has taken on renewed importance since the sort of decline of democracy about 7 or 8 years ago. The response paper is due on April 2nd, and that gives you plenty of time after the continuation of classes on March 29th to take up that paper and to complete it before its due date on the 2nd. You don't necessarily need to do work on that over the spring break. I'm trying to give you enough space to complete it when you come back, although you might find that it would be useful to get started near the end of break. I just thought it would be good to space things apart that way so that you don't find yourself too cramped with the assignments. We'll focus on civil society and the role of civil society in a democracy, and in particular in strengthening democratic institutions. We'll turn to constitutional morality and how behavioral norms around the rule of law or the importance of accepting democratic outcomes, for example, become important in a democracy. We'll turn to rights and liberties as fundamental features of a democracy and as things that need to be enjoyed by the members of a polity for a system to be democratic or to approach democracy. We need then to talk about citizen and social class and the role of citizens in democracies and really deliberative democracies in particular in Latin America, which will be another kind of case study that we'll do by focusing on Brazil and some other cases. And then finally, in the last week of the course, before the final exam on May 14th from 8 to 11, we'll focus on pluralism and liberalism as sort of ideas or cultural attributes or institutions or norms that kind of characterize a democracy. Now, the research design is due on April 30th, and that should give you 2 weeks at least to focus on preparing for that final exam. You should have plenty of space to work on these different assignments without getting too cramped. That was the objective, although it's possible that we might still adjust the schedule as we see fit as we go along with the course. What you'll notice is that we've balanced kind of theoretical and conceptual readings with more empirical and evidence-based readings. And so in each unit, I've tried to give you enough on both sides to develop a clear picture of the issue at hand, both in theory and in practice. So we do focus a lot on Latin American cases, but we also will focus on other developing countries and also advanced industrialized countries as well. The light part reading will focus on those countries in particular, but we'll focus on experiences from really most regions of the world. It's not a course about just developing countries or developed countries. It's about all democracies. And so countries do have some differences in their experiences that cut across those, that kind of cut along those lines. But we will discuss the experiences of countries at all different levels of development. So that does kind of conclude the administrative component. Let me take a look at the chat and make sure that we have everything squared away before I say a little bit about myself and introduce myself to you. Christopher says, how big is the book? Oh, if you want to print it. It's a few hundred pages. It's pretty big. We won't be reading the whole thing though. So if you want, you can cut parts of it out and edit the PDF and just print certain portions of it. I encourage you to read these things however you wish if you want to print them, but fair warning, that book is kind of long, so it might not be one that you want to print, but you could always print the individual chapters that would be useful to you. The reason I thought I would give you the whole book is because there's a lot of data and a lot of information in there that would be useful for you in your research design or just for whatever purpose. So Christopher says he found one for $5. Right on. If you want a physical copy, cool. I like PDFs personally because I can search them and because I can highlight and because I can take notes. But you know, everyone's different, and I would encourage you to engage with the book however you wish. All right, everybody. So let me tell you a little bit about myself and my background and where I come from. So I'm Colin. I'm a lecturer here in the Department of Political Science at UC Merced. I started in August, so this is my first year, and I cover comparative politics, political economy, democracy, and democratization. My regional expertise is Latin America, and I know the most about Latin America and tend to write about Latin America in my own research. But I also have an interest in Southern Europe and in Africa, and I try my best to draw on experiences and cases from throughout the world. And in this course, we'll talk about advanced countries too. So I am coming here from Skidmore College. I finished my PhD in September 2019. I got that at the University of California, Riverside. My dissertation was a study of the political economy of defense industry reform. And I created a coalitional and an institutional model of the success and failure of efforts to to reform the ownership and management of defense firms in developing countries. And I studied Portugal, Turkey, Argentina, and Chile. I've also written about Ecuador and other Latin American countries. I've written and published about export taxes, defense industries, civil military relations. So I received my PhD in 2019, and last year I was at Skidmore College. Skidmore College is a private liberal arts college in upstate New York, and it was a very interesting experience because it was a scenario and a situation I've never been in. I'm kind of from like a rural area in like Nebraska, and I went to a small state university and was very lucky to work with a number of scholars and to have a job as a research assistant that eventually set me up to be able to enter a PhD program. So I had my first year at Skidmore, and now I'm at UC Merced. I still do live in New York. I live in the Hudson Valley up here. When I was hired at UC Merced, the pandemic was so bad, and is still so bad, that it was unsafe and not really possible to travel and to move, moreover. And so I'm still here and teaching remotely, but very much interested in as engaged as ever in these topics. For me personally, democracy is something I, of course, aspire to and care about a great deal as an ideal, as a way of pursuing collective self-rule. It's also interesting to me on an analytical and a theoretical and an academic level. I think that we are at an important point in history, and the survival or demise of democratic institutions is a question, and what happens next is uncertain. And so I think that we have a unique opportunity here to talk about issues that matter, not just academically, but maybe more importantly, if not obviously more importantly, practically and politically. So think about it that way, and think about what your interests are in how the institutions of democracy become important to our daily life, and how institutions more generally structure life in all areas of life, throughout society, throughout the economy, and of course in politics. So, in this class, my role will be not just to organize and lead the class and to teach you the material, but hopefully also to get you thinking critically and inspire you, and maybe get you to reflect on where we are, and maybe hopefully kind of draw out some of your own insights and some of your own ideas about the situation, and about democratic institutions. So that's me. That's my spiel. I don't expect anyone to say anywhere near that much about themselves if they choose to introduce themselves, but I think it would be nice to just say hi, and maybe introduce yourself if you choose to. Does anyone want to say hello and tell us a little bit about their interests?
I can go.
Okay.
Um, yeah, so hi everyone. My name is Jocelyn No. Um, I'm from the Central Valley and I'm currently in Merced right now. But my interests, it's kind of like an in between political science and psychology. I'm a double major. Um, but I would say I lean kind of more towards psychology. And so being in here, it is to fill requirements, but I do find it interesting. Um, but my interest overall is like working with children, and maybe at some point dealing with the policy of like education, and in public schooling, one day.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Like one thing that comes to mind is, how do different types of democratic institutions affect education policy, or do different types of democracies, um, you know, achieve higher levels of literacy, or do they educate children more effectively? And how is education policy made in a democracy, and how do the institutions affect that? That's really interesting. And education is one thing we don't know enough about in political science, and how policy is made. And so there's a really good opportunity for us here to kind of think about the issues in ways that matter to us. And so, for me, Democracy matters for a whole bunch of reasons, but education is also one of them, and that's one thing that we hadn't mentioned yet. But if you're a student who's interested in education or some related topic, there's a lot here, and I think that we can learn a lot from you and from the class. So good to have you. Thanks so much. Uh, we'd like to hear from as many people as possible. Does someone else want to say hello and talk a little bit about their interests?
I
Yeah,
can
I'll
go.
go ahead now.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead. No, I'll go back to turning my camera off. It's cool.
Okay.
All right, for sure. Hello, my name is Jeffrey Perez Hernandez. I'm actually from Los Angeles in South Cal, and I am a political science major. And the reason why is because politics to me, it was the most outstanding and most interesting subject. But most importantly, how does more of the theoretical side gets to me, like learning about like the philosophers who actually was trying to challenge autocracies, was trying to challenge rulers, and trying to actually figure out other ways to for governments to function. And I'm hugely interested into the theoretical side of it because it's a lot interesting because democracies and autocracies to me are just super interesting. And I put in the chat um, that I find it interesting because I'm taking this class of how democracies are trying to basically be institutionalized, and then I'm also taking a class about how to be an autocracy. So I find it quite interesting that I'm taking both. But but yeah, that's my part right now.
Great. Thank you, Jeffrey. The cool thing about this course is that there is a strong theoretical component because in comparative politics, we always begin with really clear concepts. And so in a class like this, we'll always begin with a real strong, like conceptual foundation. What is a legislature? What is a court? And so from that perspective, I think there'll be a lot here for you um, to really hold on to. And I think that that's what's neat about this course, that philosophical angle that you talk about. There'll be a lot of that here. Maximus, were you going to go next?
Yeah, I can real quick. So hi everybody, I'm Maximus Gomez. I'm a second year poli sci major. I'm from Sacramento. I'm currently in Sacramento. Have yet to go back to campus. Just some of the interest I have. I'm super interested in poli sci, obviously government, the legislative branch, the executive branch, the judicial branch, everything. I get into it. I have a really huge focus and interest in like policy making, and then I also have a huge interest in history. And a pretty big unpopular opinion that I have, or just one of my favorite presidents, is Thomas Jefferson. And in terms of talking about democracy and how you shape democracy, I mean, he was a founding father, and he would play a huge instrumental role in defining what our democracy would be. So yeah, that's just, this class seems really interesting, and I just find a huge interest in the different types of democracy across the political arena and the political sphere and around the world. So super excited to learn more about that.
Great. Thank you, Maximus. There's a lot here for you as well. And I think what's neat about the course is that there is a historical kind of component because these institutions did come from somewhere, right? We did create them and we did create them and we maintain them, but who created them matters a great deal because their motivations and the circumstances of their creation shed a lot of light on the way they function. And so when we talk about, for example, Thomas Jefferson, and we talk about some of the political and the economic circumstances of the day, many of those circumstances informed the institutions in the US in ways that are still with us today. And so there is a historical component. And that's one thing that's neat about this course. I like that a lot. And it reminds us that there is sort of like an issue, an element of time involved. Democracy is not eternal, right? It's actually quite contemporary, and so in that regard, we'll get into a lot of those issues. So good to hear from you, Maximus. Thank you. We'd love to hear from as many people as possible. Does anyone else want to say hi and talk a little bit about their interests?
So my name's Christopher Reno. I'm here in Stevenson, California. So I'm in Merced County. That's all you. I'm a 300 population. So I'm out on a horse ranch. Out of work, was a union member for 10 years. Went up to the state capitol, have helped get legislation passed through the union, United Domestic Workers, Local 3930. Worked with the SEIU group up there. So democracy and institutions and um, legislation in general is important to me because my family story and my experience with the union has allowed me to understand that people really do have the power if they can get together and collectively come to a common goal. The division is what kills us, right?
Mhm.
So I would like to bring that into whatever it is we learn, because eventually I will be back in a union with that kind of job, because my long-term goal is to teach and to apply for the teaching credential through the UC Merced Extension Program.
Great. Thank you so much, Christopher. There's so much there. And I'm so happy too to hear that you would mention democracy in the workplace and the role of unions and how you would associate power and collective self-rule, not just with politics, but the workplace and the shop floor. And we will consider trade unions as democratic institutions. And so we will engage those issues. And one thing I want to encourage all of you to do from the start is to think really broadly, right? Democracy and democratic institutions, yeah, politics includes them, but so too does economics. And the way we organize the economy and society can also be democratic or authoritarian. And when we think about democracy from that perspective, we begin to notice that democracy can be everywhere or it can be nowhere, depending upon the way we organize society. And so unions become important, and the conditions that you work under become important, and democracy becomes relevant to all of this. And this is why sometimes democracy is quite difficult to put our finger on, because it kind of seems like everything, it seems quite elusive. But this is why we'll begin the course with a very clear definition of what it is and what we mean. And throughout the course, we'll apply that definition to different institutions, and we'll think about the different concepts and the different institutions in that definition, in that perspective. So there's so much here, and we have so much to look forward to and to enjoy and to get excited about. We've got 2 minutes left, and I want to give anyone else who would like to make a comment or say hello or talk a little bit about their interests a chance to do that now. Can we hear from anyone else?
Yeah, I can. Or if you want to go.
Oh, it doesn't matter. Oh, okay, I'll just start. Hi, I'm Haley. I'm a second year political science student. I live in San Bernardino, California, which is about an hour out from LA. The reason why I take this class and like I have a really big interest in poli-sci is because in high school, like everyone like really pushed going to college, but I really didn't know what to do, and I thought my interests were like not really, I guess, suitable for anything until I took like a my first like government class, and for the first time I was like, oh, I can actually like apply like my interests and like wanting to like make a difference, I guess, in things to people, and I find that really cool. So I really want to do like high school teaching, and I want to show like younger students that like their voice like matters in like politics, and that politics is such an ever-changing like environment that like I really feel like young people have like can do a lot now, unlike any other like generation. So yeah, I take this class. It was a prereq, but I'm very interested on what everything we're going to go over.
Yeah, Haley, as I always say, you may not be interested in politics, but your landlord is, your insurance company is, your employer is, right? Like all these people with power over you are into politics. And so it's useful to be politically driven and to think about politics and to take it seriously. And I think that the time has never been better to get young people excited. Rates of turnout in the US are higher than ever, and there's an interest in a desire to get into politics that's never been so strong. And so that's exciting. And I think that your interest in democracy is really useful, and we'll learn a lot from you as well. So it's so good to hear from all of you, and thank you everybody for being here. That does conclude today's meeting. I'll see you on Friday. We have the reading posted for Friday. I'll go ahead and post the syllabus as well. you know how to contact me, and I'll also post the invitation for today's office hours. But otherwise, it was so good to see you, and I'll see you on Friday. Have a good one.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank you, Gustavo.
Thank you, Professor.
Thanks,
Have a good
everybody.
day.
Have a wonderful day.
Hello, Professor.
Yeah, hi, Hector.
Hey, yeah, this is me. I took your class last semester for Latin American politics.
Yeah, how's it going?
It's going great. I just wanted to say that I'm really excited for this class as well. I really enjoyed the structure of your class last semester. Is definitely one of my favorites for sure. I expect this to be kind of similar in structure and the way it goes. So I'm really excited for this class as well.
Great. Well, it's so good to have you. And you know, I love that class. And this will be very similar. And we'll use a similar approach. And I think this hopefully can be even better. So thanks for being here, and I look forward to it.
All right, thank you so much, Professor. Have a good day.
Yeah, Hector.